Hello and welcome back to Tracking Trends. This is the budget season. On February 1st, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be presenting the budget for the financial year 2026-27. We will be, in the run up, we will be bringing you several episodes focusing on key issues and challenges that confront the Indian economy and what the budget could do, what the budget ought to do. I will have with me several experts over the coming week or so. To begin with, we look at manufacturing. What is ailing manufacturing, which is so critical to answering the most formidable challenge that we have today, that is not being able to generate enough jobs for our youth. I have with me former Secretary of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Mr. Ajay Shankar, who was also the member secretary of the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council. Welcome back, Mr. Shankar, on the show. So let me go over to the topic of the day straight. What is ailing India's manufacturing sector?
The problem with the manufacturing sector is very deep rooted and structural. And we find that the incremental efforts over the years have not had the desired impact. So, the best way to understand the seriousness of the situation is that if you look at our trade with China, it is the most rapidly growing trade of the Indian economy. And in that trade, we export raw materials or some primary goods and we import manufactured goods. And the trade deficit keeps rising every year. So, in some ways, it's like the trade of the earlier part of the 19th century when England was industrializing and we were early with the East India Company and then part of the British Empire. And the Chinese are today the most efficient, cost competitive manufacturers in the world. And they have trade surpluses with everybody in the world. So, if one looks at a very theoretical economic analysis, then there is efficient surplus capacity in China and there is growing demand in India. And the perfect fit is this is growing demand to be met by that efficient production. And the trade with China reflects that. So the trade deficit keeps rising, and when you go to the market, you find by and large the Chinese goods present in every spectrum of consumption and production. So unless there is a willingness to recognize this issue frontally and think about it and then think of measures on how to get over it, I don't see an easy breakthrough in manufacturing.
So, cheap imports from China uh, and our demand being met by the cheap imports from China, is that a cause or an effect?
Both.
Both.
Both because the Chinese on the last, I mean, when 91, we were at par with China.
Yeah.
Per capita income, manufacturing, technology, all of it, we were at par. Now, today they are competing in technology with the US or wanting to compete and overtake them. And manufacturing, they dominate the global market. So they have worked very efficiently and rationally to become cost effective, competitive manufacturers of just about everything. Now, when I look back, I think there was an error of judgment post 91 in believing that a free market and part of the globalized economy and the state withdrawing its attempt at micromanaging the economy and restricting itself to physical and social infrastructure would yield the desired results. Now, that approach has yielded results. We've done well. But we have not succeeded in manufacturing because the Chinese have done so much better.
So, we opened up the economy in early 90s based on the premise that if we open up the economy, our manufacturers will have to compete with global manufacturers, and that will force them to become competitive. But that hasn't happened. Partly also because in all these countries, particularly when you are talking about the Chinese, when the Chinese government did a lot for their manufacturing sector. They did subsidize them, they did support them with all research and development, and they made them compete with the Germans and the Japanese. We saw that also in the aftermath of the Second World War, with Japan doing the same thing. And there was definite goals, there were very clear designs, and there was a willingness to win the game, both on the part of the government and the businesses. What where we have gone wrong in the Indian context?
We went wrong in retrospect in believing that a free market being part of the globalized economy would deliver results. So the state retreated. But more than the state retreating, I think there were a series of very strategic errors which have prevented us from achieving our manufacturing potential, let me put it like this. So what were the errors? Let me list them one by one. So, when we liberalized the economy, we had over 850 or over 800 items which were reserved for small scale production in the country. And this was done because ours was a closed economy. So the idea was you disperse entrepreneurship, disperse job growth, etc. So it made some kind of sense when the economy was closed. But when we opened up the economy in the 90s and reduced import duties, we did not do away with small scale reservation. And small scale reservation were all for items which are labor intensive. So the Indian firm which was small couldn't grow big. The big firms which could have entered these sectors couldn't enter because they were reserved for small scale. And cheap imports started flooding the market. And all these small scales reserved sectors, Indian manufacturing gradually withered away. This happened even before the Chinese took over our market. The second error, which still persists because small scale reservation is ended, but the second error which still persists is unwillingness to understand what led Japan, Korea, and China to succeed and what were the key pillars of their industrial strategy. So, one major pillar was keeping the exchange rate artificially depreciated to create a stronger business case for domestic value addition in manufacturing and exports. Now, we took to market driven exchange rate regime in the 90s, which is the theory and prescription from the West. We did not recognize that we were sui generis in the sense that inflow of NRI remittances would lead to real exchange rate appreciation, whether we like it or not. And NRI remittances have been growing. So the appreciation of the real exchange rate is rarely talked about. It's not a policy issue still on the table. But this is what enabled them to succeed. Now, they artificially kept the exchange rate low, got an undue advantage or an extra advantage, till Americans told them this is not on. Now, I'm not arguing that we do what they did because the international system would not allow us to do it, but certainly we can take a conscious policy decision that we will not let the real exchange rate appreciate. So
But we but we
right
did keep
now, right now, the market has brought down the exchange rate to levels which should have been achieved gradually. So the only policy decision we need is for the government and the RBI to agree that they will maintain the real exchange rate and not let it appreciate.
but we did keep the rupee overvalued for a very long time with RBI intervention. Our obsession that rupee should not depreciate way too much, that a strong rupee is a sign of a strong economy, somewhere, that misplaced political belief uh, led the RBI to keep intervening, and which is where, I mean, for a very long time, the rupee was overvalued. Okay, so that was the second thing. So the
But here I blame the professionals in the country for not making a serious effort to educate the policy elite and the political class. So I don't hold the political class responsible. It's a failure of the economic policy elite and media and everybody else who do understand these things and have been understanding these things, but for some reason they've chosen not to articulate this strongly enough. The third thing is that the moment you open up the economy, and especially imports from low cost manufacturing destinations like China, then you need to undertake the tough reform, which has not been on the table since 91. What is the tough reform? The cost of manufacturing and the cost of production in India is high because of legacy policy issues. Legacy of cross subsidy, legacy of looking after the consumer rather than the producer, and so on and so forth. So we have not been able to say that our cost of business is high. We will do what it takes to lower it. Because if we do it, jobs will get created, manufacturing growth will take off. So we have done the soft part, which is ease of doing business. I won't say it's what job is completed, but yes, we've been talking about it. But ease of doing business is a minor part of the cost of doing business. If my costs are not good enough, then I will not invest and produce. And this is what we are seeing. So the PLI was a recognition of the fact that our costs are high. And so we said, okay, you invest this much, produce this much, we'll give you this much money. But that's a piecemeal kind of uh, treatment which doesn't address the underlying problem of the cost of doing business being too high. So unless at a strategic level the government is able to take the hard decision that we will lower the cost of doing business and therefore make it easy and more profitable for people to invest and manufacture in India, I think we will still not achieve our full potential. And to
So
give an
when
example, well, just one example of the cost of doing business, a major cost is logistics or freight or carrying things across this continental sized country. Now, energy for transport is a major component of this cost. Now, we have not yet been willing to seriously bring to the table the idea that petrol and diesel will come under GST. Ideally, they should be at the lower part of the GST, not even in the middle level, because they're an input to production and job creation. But that is not yet on the table, that reform. And I think we need to have a serious debate on these things and take a hard decision and have a hard decisions and have a trajectory which can be politically sustained, where we bring our costs of production down to our competitors, which is basically Southeast Asia and China.
So, yeah, so I was going to ask you that when you say cost of doing business has to be brought down, you mentioned transport, fuel is just one aspect of it. Uh, I think the tolls that we charge, the commercial taxes we charge, do you think they're also a big, I mean, because that has just kept growing. We do hear from a lot of people about how that's in some cases people find it prohibitive.
I mean, I would maybe at the risk of some overstatement or for a dramatic effect say that if you look at every factor of production or every cost which goes into production, other than real wages, everything else is so high that it is not profitable to invest. So take something like rate of interest. Now, our real rates of interest have been, I would say, almost a multiple of those of our competitors for the distortions in the financial system and the financial markets. If you look at the cost of land with infrastructure, the fastest growing asset value is land. So anywhere where infrastructure becomes reasonably decent, prices move up so rapidly that industrial units start making way to real estate of luxury housing and malls and stuff like that. So if you get land which is cheap, but in the middle of nowhere with no social infrastructure for housing for people to live there and work, then those huge land estates remain under sold and underdeveloped, because production needs to be where infrastructure is.
Yeah.
So we are not willing to address the issue of lowering the cost of land, because in the old pre 91 days, even Delhi was giving land at no profit, no loss through DDA for the industrial estates which did so well.
So, over the last several years, uh, and I'm not talking about the regime that is in place, even the previous regime, they significantly, at least they claim that they significantly invested, and it's not a claim, we can see it also in the road infrastructure, in terms of various other logistical facilities. Uh, we also, there has been several changes on the railways front. Why then is it not translating into bringing down the cost of business, or is it that the cost of business has come down only for a few, uh, and for a large majority it's still many things remain inaccessible?
I would put it like this, that we have achieved a breakthrough in physical infrastructure. So there are all-weather roads connecting all habitations. Our highway network is becoming better every day. Uh, we've got lots of airports coming up. The railway freight corridors have come up. But as you pointed out, that if there are high rates of tolls on highways, then it's an added cost. So for freight, I have the added cost of tolls as well as the high cost of diesel. So that's a
There are
cost
also
disadvantage.
there are also multi-layered costs involved in cargo movement
Yeah,
also.
that's what I. Now the railways have yet to achieve the breakthrough that they want to achieve of appearing to a business enterprise an attractive mode for carrying goods. If you look at the freight composition of the railways, it is by and large the bulk cargo of the old economy. So coal to power plants, fertilizer for farmers, food grains from FCI all over India, etc. But
Right.
they are yet to become the preferred mode of transport for businesses, small and large. I mean, so much so that they have not yet been able to create a railway line spur to the car industry in India.
Right.
So Suzuki doesn't have a railway spur going to the plant. While over 100 years back, every textile mill had a railway line going to the textile mill in Calcutta and Bombay, or
Mhm,
Kolkata and Mumbai. So,
mhm,
so, so the railways have not yet achieved the transformation by
mhm,
which, on commercial grounds, they take goods traffic because they provide good cost-effective service.
mhm.
So that transformation of the railways is still a work in progress.
Mhm.
And the
So,
railways have the same problem of cross subsidy, which the electricity sector has.
yeah,
So the electricity tariffs in India for industry are the highest, multiple of what our competitors. So you keep pushing up every factor of the cost of production, and your only strength is low real wages. Then, if in spite of that there is industrial growth, manufacturing growth of a modest level, it's a tribute to our entrepreneurs.
right. So, three things that here you are saying, I mean, three major things in cost of doing business: cost of logistics, cost of transport, etc., uh, cost of credit, uh, and also the other thing which you mentioned,
Land,
cost of energy,
land with developed
land,
infrastructure.
cost of power. Now
Yeah.
there is, I would just, I didn't want to mention land because there is very little probably you can do in the immediate
No, it
context.
can be done. It can be done. I don't think so that it
Can
is
be.
not possible to do. After all, DDA did it till 91.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okhla Industrial Estate and so on. So forth.
Yeah.
UP did it with Noida. Gurgaon did it with all the industrial parks in Gurgaon. So it was done. It can be done. Because creating infrastructure in an urban center is doable, affordable, but only the state can do it. A private developer cannot create the critical mass that you need. And
That's
that's what
right.
the Chinese did. Chinese created these special zones of thousands of acres. And that's why
Yeah.
they were able to build plants of the scale that they can dominate the global market.
And we did want to emulate that, but we didn't go very far with it.
No, we
Our
didn't. We
estimates,
didn't. We
our
didn't want
estimates
to
were,
emulate it. We thought the private sector can do it, and
uh,
it was beyond the private sector. Even Reliance couldn't create a whole city. I mean, they did take 1,000 acres here and there, but a whole city is far more than thousands of acres. 1,000
so,
acres.
in the light of this, let's take one at a time. So, cost of infrastructure, logistics, transport. What is it that the finance minister can do in her upcoming budget, and what the government can do outside the budget?
I would say that if she were to announce the setting of a very high level committee or an expert group to make very specific recommendations on reducing the cost of production in India, that would be more than enough, because in 10, 15 days all these things can't be spelled out in detail. And
But
the other big and the other big announcement would be to say that we believe in maintaining a competitive real exchange rate, and we do not like the real exchange rate to appreciate. Politically, it would suit her to be bold enough to say that whatever we have seen is a market driven correction which should have been done gradually by us. I hope she finds it the confidence and the courage to say that what we are seeing is the market doing what maybe we should have done with the RBI, gradually, with less pain to the economy.
finance minister usually refrain from commenting on exchange rates.
No,
So
but I believe she should do it, because till she does it, the no governor RBI will be able to do what is needed. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we say it's autonomous, but there is a broad agreement necessary with the political class.
yes, you're talking about another high level committee. We have had actually many committees. You yourself were the member secretary of the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council. I mean, in a way, that body would have also gone into all these issues. And I don't think things should have changed
No,
a
no,
lot.
I would say that the prevailing paradigm of globalization, free markets, etc., was strong then, is still strong. Now, with President Trump and others uh, saying that there is a retreat from that kind of globalization. So I think at this juncture, it is far easier for India to go back to the basics and think in what ways the state can intervene and support the private sector to become globally competitive. We are seeing first some signs of that in the last few years, the state willing to do a few things which were earlier off the table.
Yeah. Now, let me come back to the PLI thing. For example, in 2020, we rolled out PLIs from 1.97 lakh crore and all that. 14 sectors were identified. But 5 years down the line, and at that point in time, it was said that the PLI will help create globally competitive Indian manufacturing, and our aim is to increase the share of manufacturing to 25% of GDP. The data tells you something else. Prior to PLI, our the share of manufacturing was about 15%. Today, it's hovering below 14%. And in the PLI, the ones which have done well and who have also gotten significant benefits, I'm not sure if they actually needed it. Companies like Reliance, Apple, Mahindra. I mean, is there a need to relook? I mean, has it somewhere gone wrong? I mean, right initiative executed in a very inappropriate fashion.
I would put it differently. So let's take the case of Apple. Now, Apple has demonstrated that you can do globally competitive manufacturing in India, you can acquire the scale, you can employ through your supply chain 100,000 people and have enormous production volumes in just 4 or 5 years. Now, that's the strength which Apple has brought to India. But it has demonstrated to the Indian elite that there is a myth, the feeling that we are strong in services and we can't be strong in manufacturing. So that myth has been punctured, and I think all the subsidy given to Apple is well worth it. But as I argued earlier, that the PLI is like a paracetamol. So
Yeah,
instead of trying to extend PLI to sector by sector and address the underlying cause, and which is the cost of production. So if you start addressing that and have a roadmap that in 3, 4, 5 years, say we will start lowering the tax rate on diesel and bring it to the highest slab of GST in say 2, 3 years, and even earlier if you can. I would much. I mean, if I were there, I said do it tomorrow. After all, when in the early 90s, all the import duties and tax rates were lowered, the Indian economy didn't collapse. After all, if you look back at the early 90s, import duties were slashed, tax rates were slashed for the corporates, etc., etc. Or we ourselves lowered the corporate tax rate to 15% for some categories, brought it down to, I think, 25, in the belief that that extra money would lead to investment. The investment has not happened because it's not profitable to invest. And it will be profitable to invest only if we reduce the cost of production in India. That's the argument I'm making.
talking of taxes, we have been able to bring down tax rates to fairly competitive levels. But unfortunately, for a large number of businesses, the taxman is still a dreaded man, and they continue to be subject to a lot of harassment. And we still, the permit raj is gone, but is it? I mean, do you agree that there is still a lot of bureaucratic hurdles, red tapeism that particularly the small guys, the big guys have their people, they get things done, but the small guys really have to spend a lot of time, waste a lot of money and effort.
It's a mixed picture because there is a long history of various branches of the bureaucracy at the working level seeking rents. So now that is not something you can change with one signature on a file or one farman. It's something to be achieved with incrementally, step by step, systematically, and with a lot of political will. And a lot of it is at the state level also. So I think a compact, the political class, that so these also need to be addressed and reduced. And it's an incremental progress, but I think we have seen some progress, I would say, and I think we can build on the progress. And certainly on the tax side, there is a case for having a more transparent system of redressal of perceptions and complaints of unfair treatment. Because one of the reasons why small people don't want to complain is that they have to live with the same tax people
Yes,
or the
yes.
same inspectors or whatever. So it's a tougher challenge, but I think we have been making some progress. This whole digital governance is a big step forward, and we can really build on it and hope to succeed. But to me, all the other costs of doing business are easier to address and will have a very dramatic effect in the short run.
Now, okay, let's just come back and I will take you back from where you started. You talked about the Chinese imports and how they. So, what is it that we need to be doing now? Do we raise customs duties? Do we raise them selectively, or do we raise a non-tariff barrier? On the other hand, we have a huge Trump shadow on over the coming budget. We did reduce some tariff rates on imports from the US, but I think the expectation would be we will have to do more because we want that deal with the US. The government wants that deal with the US. So, given this context, how do you think the finance minister can navigate? Because it's a very tightrope walk kind of situation.
I mean, since there is also a lot of very sensitive geopolitics involved,
Hmm.
I would not like the finance minister to talk about China. It is better to talk about how we become more competitive. I have been talking about China to create the theoretical
Yeah,
understanding of why we need to act. But
yeah.
essentially, to go back to your question, we will need a selective approach, a calibrated approach, and the kind of skill in choosing what to do and how to do, which will have to be created because we're not doing that. I mean, our approach is, a little old world. Here's a PLI, here's the subsidy, take it.
mm,
But sectoral industrial policy is something we haven't really attempted as yet. I mean, we
mm.
see some signs of it in the new scheme which METI has announced for the electronic component manufacturing,
Right.
which is
Mm,
the first of its kind, and it's very good.
mm,
But all of it has to be fine tuned and needs a realistic understanding and analysis of where we are. Because the
mhm,
last thing we should do is go for a shock therapy and raise tariff barriers across the
mm,
board to very high levels.
mm,
They- and the other thing is that we keep needing to support domestic firms and domestic competition
mm,
and supporting our small firms to become large and global players.
mhm,
And this kind of working with Indian business and firms
mhm,
is going to be challenging because who do you choose to support? Which sector do you support? Like we are seeing with PLI, every ministry, every sector has been demanding PLI, and many have got it. And
mhm.
some of them need not have got it because, as you said, they didn't really need it. They were doing well enough without PLI.
I
So
mean,
then,
some of these companies, I don't mind taking even names, but we know some of these companies can go and spend 4,000 crore on the industrialist son's wedding. Why do they need taxpayers' money as an incentive? On the other hand, that 4,000 crore can go and probably hundreds of MSMEs could benefit, and that clearly is not happening. I mean, I think it is time we need to start talking about it. But more importantly, I mean, you were bringing up this issue, now that the way the world is kind of shaping up, there is this imperative to localize manufacturing. And truth be told, I mean, nobody buys a Godrej refrigerator today here. There is no Indian brand of laptop that we buy. There is no Indian brand of mobile phone that we buy. I mean, you name everything that aspiring Indian wants to buy. It's nothing that is Indian. Even what the poor buy is also, China is actually meeting the aspirational needs of the poor and the underclass much better than what our companies can do. Uh, Now, and this is happening because we all always talk about what the government could have done or government can do and government did not do. But on the other hand, despite making lots of profit, especially in the last 20, 30 years, our industry, particularly our industry leaders, have not invested in research and development, have not invested in creating original products from A to Z that could be globally competitive. You talked about the Shables in Korea or the Japanese. The government gave them support, but they were put on certain targets, and they were very disciplined in pursuing those targets. Here, is there a bigger problem as a country? Are we more of a mercantilist nation rather than an industrial nation?
uh, I think you have identified one weak spot, which is the uh, lack of ambition in our industrial class. I mean, the desire to be global leaders and to be globally competitive is very weak. So those who have become very big, I won't take names, they have become very big because either they are in the non-tradable sector or one of them has done very smart things at the right time and therefore they're global players and globally competitive. One has to accept that and take pride in it, I would say. But but these were decisions taken a long time back. So the last 5, 10 years I'm not seeing that kind of ambition to become global players and to have brands which first dominate the Indian market and then dominate the global market. But part of the problem, as I see it, is a chicken and egg story. Because if my cost of production is so high that back of the envelope calculation says it's not really worth making that effort, then I won't make the effort. And again, the effort has to be to increase my share in the domestic market. in a competitive structure and then go overseas. And the other is that all the East Asian economies, starting from Japan, Korea, China, there has been this very good partnership, productive partnership, but partnership behind closed doors where you agreed that this is the roadmap and this is how we will create brands or succeed and so on. Now, that is not a trait as yet in our governance system. That having a medium term vision, okay, 5 7 years, this sector, this is the share of imports, we will reduce that by 30 40%, or we'll create this brand or some brands and these will start gaining domestic market share or getting global market share. Well, that kind of work is not easy.
But why do our companies not invest in R&D? What is holding them back? Why do they not invest in new product development?
I would say it's a mixed picture. Some of them are doing it and some of them have done
Very,
well.
very, very few. That's
You're
nothing.
right. You're right. But the fact of the matter is that, again, if you look at it from a purely investment point of view, if I can buy technology from the world and produce and sell in the Indian market and make money, why should I spend money which is risky in developing technology? So it could well be argued that we are at such an early stage of technology development that it may be worthwhile to consider something very radical. So let me just throw up an idea that government could be the angel investor for R&D, okay? And it's risk money. But if that investment results in commercial gains, the government can claim royalty for the IPR developed. So an Indian firm which has the capacity to develop technology in, say, our assessment, is not doing so because it doesn't have the confidence, doesn't want to take the risk, etc., etc. So we say, okay, you develop it. If you succeed, we get back our investment like any angel investor does in a startup. And we have examples where Indian firms have actually, where government has partnered them, achieved something. So I think the Baba Kalyani group has now an tank or something, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
which
we talked about Bharat Forge and one of the
or or
office.
or L&T has done something. So, but you can scale it up very rapidly. Like post Operation Sindoor, one keeps reading about startups and drones and things like that. So, so one has to take a hard-headed assessment and look of where we are, and then see how we can leapfrog. I mean, the
You
ambition has to be to leapfrog rather than look at incremental progress, because we've been seeing last so many years incremental efforts and incremental outcomes, sometimes positive, sometimes not that positive.
incremental outcomes and incremental efforts is also what the bureaucracy loves. Nobody wants a radical change. um, but tell me honestly, how hopeful are you that we will be able to turn around the manufacturing sector, or is it a lost cause now?
I think we have the potential to do it and do it very quickly. But market forces being left alone, unlikely. So it's for government to assume strategic leadership. And if it does take the right calls, then you can see results in a few years. I mean, how quickly things can happen, just look at Apple. They're barely 5 years in India and see how big they've become.
Hmm.
And if you look at the Chinese, 2005, solar panel manufacturing was a German monopoly. By 2015, the German industry had ceased to exist because the Chinese became so good at it. Now, I would argue that the HR, the human capital in this country, has become very rich, and at every level, from shop floor workers to managers to people in finance to people wanting to do innovation and design and so on. So we are actually a very resource-rich country in terms of human capital. And this is notwithstanding the fact that those poor numbers are talked about the quality of our education. Notwithstanding that our numbers are so large that there is no dearth of the right skills for a large firm wanting to do things in India, an Indian firm or a foreign firm. So that's our big strength. And therefore, with the right steps, I'm sure in 3, 4, 5 years, we'll see dramatic results the way we've seen with Apple in manufacturing.
Oh, thank you very much. So we can do it. Manufacturing can be turned around, but the government will have to take the lead. The onus rests with the government, uh, and it has to take a strategic leadership in the matter. Thank you very much. We went through a lot of issues, and I'm really grateful to you because you have a book release lined up this evening. Um, for all those who are watching, it's Mr. Shankar's first book. It's on the energy transition, uh, and he's also a distinguished fellow at Terry. Uh, and I am sure we will also have a discussion. That's another topic which merits a completely dedicated show. We'll talk about it sometime again. Thank you very much. Despite the fact that the book show is scheduled this evening, he has taken time out. Thank you very much.